that, who are we as a group?
Yeah.
Yeah, so, okay, let me keep going on study 2, but you're pointing out some difficulties in studying this because it is such a reciprocal process. And this is the easier part to study. So Boaz Shamir is a famous leadership person. He was one of our reviewers. He revealed himself later to us, and we talked a lot about this. He was a discussant in a symposium we held on this, and he said, you know, I like this work very much. He goes, but what I love is the claiming granting, and what you're studying is the LSS part. And he said, I know why you're studying it, because it's easier to study. We can measure it, we can manipulate it, we can study it. But the claiming and granting and the now studying this, even studying this in the field, it gets very overdetermined. It's very difficult. But I had never thought of your point before. I like that point as a complexity, even though the whole thing is complex. Okay, you may also wonder why we're looking at, in our sort of cognitive appraisal and perception of person, competence and warmth. We're doing it based on this research by Cuddy. It's really by Susan T. Fisk and her student Cuddy. And they argue that every perception we ever have about another human can be boiled down to competence and warmth. That really it's just those two buckets. So they say psychological research involving thousands of people, widely varied cultures, established two trait dimensions to sort our social world. They've been shown to account for 82% of the variance in perceptions of everyday social behaviors. And I like this because it sort of explains a little bit maybe why this is so. And they say people make rapid evaluations of others' warmth to gauge their intentions. Are their intentions benign to me or malign? And then others' competence to engage their ability to act on those intentions. Oh, she has a very benign intention to me, but she's an idiot, so never going to be able to do anything to work on that. I didn't totally believe this, and I created another little measure we used that just measured what I thought people might think about someone stepping up to lead. So it included this person is self-serving, this person is out for him or herself, this person is pushy, this person is arrogant. Correlated negative 0.70 with warmth. So, you know, I'm getting to be more of a believer of these two buckets. But anyway, that's what we looked at. And then we looked at the positivity of your affective reaction. Okay, so we did a modified version of study 2, same Amazon Turk, same kind of nature of a sample. They were assigned to shared or hierarchical. We didn't use a control manipulated as in study 2. But then there was this further part. We said, now imagine that you are at attending the first meeting of the task force. Person heading the task force, PL, begins the meeting by explaining some of the objectives of the task force and outlining a timeline for the completion of the key deliverables. After PL finishes speaking, a member of the task force, NW, speaks up and offers several specific ideas to the group about additional objectives that would enhance the success of the task force's overall core mission. In doing so, NW provides a persuasive picture of additional goals that the task force might accomplish that are consistent with the objectives that PL outlined. And if you can kind of read between the lines, you can see what we're trying to do. We're trying to say, NW, this member, spoke up, but he wasn't contradicting PL. He was, you know, supplementing and adding to. It was not supposed to be a challenge or anything like that. That's what we're trying to create with that scenario. Then we're interested in people's reactions to NW. So to what extent would they just, especially when it goes to the results, what extent would the describe competence, that's how it's measured, warmth, that's how it's measured, about this person who spoke up. And here's what we found. That NW, if you have a hierarchical LSS, you saw NW as less competent. You also saw NW as less warm than if you had a shared LSS. So your reactions to that person were less positive. In terms of positive affect, you had a lot more positive emotion about as a result of NW's behavior, and if you had a shared LSS. than a hierarchical LSS. So what this got us thinking is that there's something that goes on in groups that is affected by how you think about the structure of leadership in groups. And it probably ends up creating a culture based on these reactions over time. To the extent that people act on their feelings and perceptions based on their LSS, they reinforce within the group the leadership pattern they expect. So if you have a hierarchical LSS and somebody else leads, you'll think positively of that person, they make you feel less positive in your affect, chances are you communicate that, maybe that discourages them from leading. Over time you get a hierarchical pattern. Don't ask the question, how does the one leader emerge, because I don't know the answer.
No, that's not what I'm going to ask. I was just wondering, does this at all depend on whether the person, him or herself, is the leader type, whether he has the identity?
NW or the observer?
Doesn't matter, the person who's answering. I don't mean those two.
The
Because
person
if
who's
the person,
answering.
yeah, I mean, he's not one of these people. However, does this person like being a leader
Oh,
himself
yeah.
or not?
Yeah, well, it's
Does
a
it-
little bit
yeah,
Stefan's
indeed.
question, are you
Yeah,
motivated
does
to
it-
be a leader? Well,
Because I might, react differently if I don't care about being a leader at all.
right, but that
Whatever-
would be a randomized variable in
Yeah,
our
that's
study,
true.
so we don't,
Yeah, I mean, that's,
it may very well make a difference,
Yeah.
but irrespective of that, LSS
Yeah.
makes a difference.
yeah.
Love experiments, great answer to most questions. Okay, study 3. So you may not have noticed, but our reviewers certainly noticed that we actually have no measure of any behavior in those studies that we looked at. It's all just thoughts in people's heads, thoughts about groups, thoughts about what they would do in groups, etc. And so the reviewers, this paper is at AMJ and it's back at AMJ now, but I have a feeling we're going to be going through another round. They asked us to put a study of actual behaviors, either a lab study where we got people to do things or a field study. And we looked at a field study, and we're looking at the impact of LSS on the leadership behaviors of non-designated leaders in a consulting group. There actually were all not, there was no designated leaders, so it's just a group of peers. And we're going to examine the role of group context in the form of the dominant level LSS, in bounding the individual relationship between LSS and informal leadership behavior. So I'm going to hope to explain that. So what we argue is that over time, groups, well, we didn't argue this, groups as they interact over time, they come to have a general cognitive map of various group processes. And these group level cognitive structures then have important effects on members' expectations, behavior, and social interactions. So we come to see group processes as appropriately unfolding this way, not that way. And that was older research that has shown that. And what we're arguing is that that may also be true regarding LSS, that over time we come to a collective understanding about how leadership should be done in this group, by lots of us or by really just one person. And that's going to interact with the individual LSS that people have to predict leadership behavior, actual behavior. That was important to our reviewers. And so what we're arguing is that the dominant group LSS does the following theoretically. The group level LSS impacts the extent of social cues encouraging informal leadership in the group. That's kind of the story I've been telling as we go along. That, if I have a shared LSS and you lead, chances are I could be affirming. If I have a hierarchical, chances are I'm not going to be affirming. So that it extends that those cues that are out there are impacted by the group LSS over time. And the individual LSS influences the individual's susceptibility to the presence or absence of those cues. And if you notice by every picture I've shown you thus far, all the action is in the hierarchical LSS. The shared LSS doesn't seem to have this positive effect. The hierarchical LSS has a dampening effect. And we're going to end up arguing that as well. So consider two scenarios. If the group LSS is hierarchical, once a single leader is constructed, few cues will encourage informal leadership.